Welcome to the Hoover Library Sci-Fi Fantasy Fest. Oh, we got some housekeeping items. Everybody look to the right. Check out the Zoom instructions over there. We will be taking questions at the end of my presentation. So we're going to talk about comic book movies tonight. My name is Charlie Brown, and I am a writer, I am a filmmaker, and I am a film critic. I have had many jobs in media, and I'm also a college professor who teaches digital media, composition, and journalism. So I've had a long history with comic book movies and superhero films. And I've been watching them and been obsessed with them well since my childhood in the 70s. And it's just one of these things that when you talk about comic book movies, you have to understand that there is a weird history there, that they started off as something that Hollywood couldn't quite get their hands around. They couldn't quite figure out where they were going. And then eventually they ended up where we are now, where the only films are comic book films. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen here, and I'm going to show you we're going to go to the PowerPoint and check this out. Whoop, let me start from the beginning here. Come on. Okay, so this is called The Good, the Bad, the Underground, a brief and critical review of comic book movies. So let's go back to the late 60s or the mid 60s and early 70s. And this was a time of real innovation in the actual comic books. You had Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams looking into the streets and saying, there's the hippie movement's happening, the Black Power movement is happening. We're going to take Batman, and we're going to take Green Lantern, and we're going to take Spider-Man. We're going to take all these guys, and we're going to make them relevant. We're going to make them relevant to today's youth. But unfortunately, all Hollywood ever saw was this: Batman with the bomb. Now, if you've ever seen the Batman movie, well, you know it is. Yeah, you know what it is. So before we get too deep in this, let me explain myself since I am a filmmaker, since I am a creator, I have a highly developed sense of camp. I love Adam West and Batman. However, when I look at these comic book movies, I also look at them as a creator, and I look at them and say, yeah, sometimes so bad it's good can be acceptable, but I kind of like so good it's good. You know, maybe I'm weird about this. It doesn't necessarily line up with the nerdy approach or the geeky approach to movies, but that's what I think. So Batman right here is what Hollywood thought comic books were all about. And so when we look at him, he's like, all right, they just thought it was for kids. And that was what almost everybody outside of comic book readers thought were kids. Now let's take a step back and understand something about cinema history, because two films changed the idea of cinema history. Now, this is before my time, but in my parents' time, when you went to a movie, you were going to expect to see this. Typical day of the movies pre-1960. You would expect to see a cartoon, a newsreel, a serial, which is where a lot of the first comic book movies took place, but it was also Flash Gordon and stuff like that. A short film, which is where directors got to cut their teeth. And then you saw two full features, a B movie and an A movie. Now, the A movies were your Gone with the Wind, Citizen Kane's. These were your prestige films, and they were considered the best movies. They were considered the art movies. Now, the B movies were your romances, film noir, and of course, science fiction films, where they had giant ants roaming the countryside, big lizards, King Kong, that sort of stuff. And those were considered B movies. They were not given the time or the budget that the A movies were. But then something changed. And in the mid-70s, you had a couple of films flip the script. These two movies in particular. 1976, Jaws, a monster movie, a kaiju movie, if you will, and 1977, Star Wars, a science fiction film. And what Hollywood saw was that these two movies pulled in a whole lot of money. They pulled in so much money. They said, well, wait a minute. Why do we care about Citizen Kane? Now, remember, this is the mid-70s. The 70s is considered the golden age of realistic and hardcore cinema. You have, Roman Polanski, Martin Scorsese, all those great films from the 70s. They're all there. But those now had to start to take a back seat to tentpole films. And so when they saw what were used to be films for kids, or what we considered to be movies, they now became A movies, which led us to this. The first great comic book adaptation, Superman the movie. You'll believe a man can fly. Directed by Richard Donner, starring Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder. Superman the movie is a really interesting case. Superman the movie is a really interesting case because the first 40 minutes of this film is possibly the best 40 minutes ever captured in comic book adaptation. The problem is none of that contains Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder. It's literally all of the stuff on the planet, the original planet, and the young man who's Clark Kent, who is so put upon because he can't use his powers. And but the stuff on Krypton with Marlon Brando is just tremendous. It is tight, it is serious, it is so atmospheric, just some of the best stuff. And then Christopher Reeve comes on. Now, I'm not going to say a bad word about Christopher Reeve's performance in this film. It is quite possibly it's so visceral. There are moments where he inhabits both characters so well. Margot Kidder is a fantastic Lois Lane. There's no way around it. In fact, if you go back to the 1930s cartoons that were made about Superman, you see that Lois Lane has always been kind of a badass, and Margot Kidder attached to that. But the problem is that the two of them, when those two come together, it kind of becomes a Hepburn and Tracy romantic comedy, and it's just not quite as tight. Gene Hackman actually makes a great Lex Luthor, but his plan is dumb. It's really dumb. It's let's have an earthquake to cut off California, and then I bought all the real estate. And it's like, this is I bought all the real estate along the fault line, so I'm going to be rich because people are going to build houses on the new ocean. It's really kind of dumb. It's really dumb. It's unworkable. I'm going to demand logic from these comic book movies. I know I might get back on that saying, but it's fun. I'm going to demand a little bit of logic. And the whole flying the Earth backwards, I didn't buy it. You might be there was a recent article about this, how they really bought it because it was such a romantic gesture. I didn't quite buy that either, but it's still a good movie. All right, Gen Xers, hold on to your hearts. You're not going to like this because Superman 1 leads to Superman 2. The first big comic adaptation, dud. Now I know you're screaming at me right now. All the few of you who are there, I know, I know you're screaming at me. This is my favorite movie. This was my favorite movie from when I was a kid. I love it so much. This movie stinks. This movie is really, really bad. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in some sort of Mandela effect where everybody remembers how great this film is, except they kind of haven't watched it in a few years. It's really, really bad. Let me tell you what's wrong with Superman 2, and it's not everything. Christopher Reeves, as always, is great. Margot Kidder, all the performances by the main two. What you're remembering as being great is the performance by Terrence Stamp as General Zod. It's an unassailable performance. It's fantastic. He's menacing. He has a certain power, and that makes Superman look a little bit weak. There's a couple of problems. If you don't know the full story behind this, Richard Donner started directing it and then had to drop out, was fired, and Richard Lester took over. And when Donner was fired, Gene Hackman also said, well, I'm not coming back for reshoots. And so they don't use Gene Hackman at all. Well, they use Gene Hackman as little as possible. Now, Richard Lester is one of my favorite film directors. He was an absolute genius who made four masterpieces. He made Hard Day's Night and Help by the Beatles. He made The Knack and How to Get It, and he made The Three and Four Musketeers. This film is a holy mess. It doesn't make any sense. There's a point where Superman gives up his powers, goes through this whole thing, gives up his powers, and then when he needs them back, he just gets them back. He just, oh, okay, I'm Superman again. Why? I don't know. How? I don't know. I'm just Superman again. The ending is bad. The fight scenes are really terribly shot. It's just not a good movie. And I know, and again, I can't read the chat room right now. So I mean, go ahead and curse me to high heaven. Feel free. It's just go back, or don't go back and watch. Now I will say this. Richard Donner went back and he did a recut in about 15 years ago that solved a lot of the problems, and it's a much better movie with that because it shows the consequences of giving up power and regaining the power. It brings back Marlon Brando. It works a lot better. I also believe because he had access to digital editing that the first two Supermans were cut on film. You had to sit there and splice everything together. Movies like that are not usually as tight. Now that we have digital editing, you can really lock it down. So anyway, go back and watch it. Tell me I'm wrong, but the last time I watched it, I was flummoxed by how bad this film was. All right, let's move. But one of the great things about the Superman series was it led to a small boom in superhero films. And you see the ones here on the left, Condor Man, Flash Gordon, which is a camp classic, The Toxic Avenger, Red Sonja, a few others. Notice that notice all of the, and then of course what we're going to talk about in a second, the return of Captain Invincible. Notice the thing that these are not major properties. Superman did not lead to a great deal of adaptations. What it did was like, oh, we're going to make up superheroes and we're going to put them in. And so you have a film like The Return of Captain Invincible. Yes, that is Alan Arkin as Captain Invincible. And he goes up against Christopher Lee. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have seen this film. I recently dug into the bowels of YouTube in order to dig it up. So I got a question for you. If you're going to make a superhero film, don't have a whole lot of money, you got to shoot it in Australia, don't have a big special effects budget, What are you going to do? Well, hell, let's write some songs and turn it into a musical. That's correct. The Return of Captain Invincible is a superhero musical years before the U2 Spider-Man film. This is just a bad film. It is a campy film. It's from 1980. It's really of its time. Captain Invincible is he had a problem. He got kicked out of he got turned away by the government. He goes down to Australia. He becomes a becomes a homeless guy, and they have to dig him out because Christopher Lee's about ready to take over the world. His power is magnetism, and he mostly uses it to take the clothes off of women accidentally. This one walks the line. It's almost a Porky's superhero film. But it's just, it's just one of those things in the early 80s. They just didn't know what they were doing. And so they were like, well, we can't how are we going to do these films? How are we going to say, and so you end up with stuff like this. So finally, DC gets taken over by Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers says, we're going to make a movie. And that led to the big blockbuster, Batman the movie. Jack Nicholson is the Joker. Michael Keaton is Batman. Okay. Hot take alert. Hot take alert. This is not a bad movie. Tim Burton has a very good visual style in this one. I feel his later films, his style becomes a little murky, a little less kinetic. But this film actually does work on that sense. The problem that I have with Batman, and again, I saw this. I was absolutely obsessed with this film when I was in college. I saw it 6 times in the theater. And I was like, oh, Tim Burton's a genius. I love Big Top Pee-wee. I love Pee-wee's Big Adventure and all that sort of stuff. And then a friend of mine and I were looking at it. We were breaking down superhero films, and he came up with this really interesting analysis. And I have to ask, I'm going to ask you right now, who is the protagonist of this film? Who is the protagonist of Batman the movie? And you're going to say, well, it should be Batman. Should be the Joker. No. Who do we see this film? Whose eyes do we see this film through? This movie is a Vicky Vale movie. Vicky Vale is the hero of this film. We see everything played out through her eyes. We never get to know who Batman is. We kind of sort of get to know who Joker is, but it's the real problem with this round of Batman films. It's just we never truly get to understand who Batman is. And it's why Nolan's films are superior, because they're actually more human. Tim Burton and later Joel Schumacher were not interested in the humanity. They were interested in the spectacle. And while that's great, these movies are kind of cold. On a personal note, right before Batman Returns, which is the Val Kilmer one, I went to this movie with a friend of mine, and we were in the parking lot of the movie theater. And I turned to him and I said, if Batman takes his mask off for a girl for the 3rd movie in a row, I'm never seeing another Batman film. And of course, Nicole Kidman, halfway through, mask comes off and blah, blah, blah. So I have never seen Batman and Robin, the George Clooney. Now, most of you are probably saying, well, that's probably for the best. Eventually, I'll get around to it. But it's just that kind of problems. Like in comic books, for 30 years, Batman never revealed himself to anyone. And in 3 movies, 3 women and one of them was Catwoman. She was insane. But anyway, so So these movies are good, but problematic. However, as we all know, this movie in particular, Batman, made a gajillion, a whole lot of money. I think it was like the opening weekend was 44 million, which is, you remember, it's 1988 or 89. So that's all. Yeah, it's basically like a $200 million opening. So this made so much money that everyone all of a sudden wanted to get in on these movies. Especially a little publisher who hadn't really had a whole lot of success getting their movies made, Marvel. And there, Marvel tries in the 80s and 90s to make movies. Woo! Here we go. Howard the Duck proved that George Lucas wasn't perfect. Wasn't perfect. Dolph Lundgren starred as the Punisher. This guy, I don't even know who this guy is. This guy right over here played Captain America. And Roger Corman made the Fantastic Four. We will talk about the Fantastic Four in just 1 second. But let's talk about this guy, Mr. Potato Head here, who is Captain America. This is one of the worst films ever made. Captain America, the original one. It's made by Albert Pyun, who is infamously the Ed Wood of the 80s. Just a terrible filmmaker. One of my favorite parts of the Captain America movie is it starts in World War II. He gets, it's the typical Captain America story. He gets thrown onto the ice. They dig him up, and he comes back to save the world. So we have the Red Skull. Except the Red Skull isn't a Nazi. He's not German. He's an Italian fascist. Why? I don't know. They cast an Italian guy instead of casting a German guy. So now he's Italian. Hooray. Takes half the menace away from him. And then when they dig up Captain America out of the North Pole, he's had facial reconstructive surgery. So now he's not the Red Skull anymore. He's the flesh-colored skull. It makes no sense. They didn't even want to put a mask on the guy for the entire movie. And, Captain America, I think I'm in probably as good a shape as this guy. It's just poorly acted. No direct. Just one of those things that makes you wonder why anyone would ever give somebody like Albert Pyun money to make a film. And then, of course, there's the tragic tale of the Fantastic Four. Now, this is the original one from 1994. And again, you got to go on YouTube. You got to dig deep. You got to make sure to find it. But I have watched this thing. Now, this was made for about $1 million. In fact, it was championed by Film Threat magazine, one of the great independent film magazines of the 90s. As like they were interviewing the filmmakers, and they were saying, oh my God, this is it's only $1 million, but they have all these computer effects and they really work. They don't. But there's some really stupid storytelling in this. Like you have Reed Richards, brilliant scientist. You have Ben Grimm, experienced pilot. And then you have Sue Storm, school teacher, and her brother, Johnny Storm, 16. And Reed's just like, hey, let's all go fly into space together. It's just one of the many things that just don't make sense about this. And so the Fantastic Four movie was never, they made it, and then they never released it. It was made literally so one studio could hold on to, so that a producer could hold on to the copyright and say that he has made the film, and then he can hold on to the copyright and make the later one. Here's the funny thing about this movie. It's not much worse than the one that Hollywood made. It's the same story almost. There's almost no crime fighting, almost, and then at the end they fight Doctor Doom. So I have nothing good to say about any of the Fantastic Four movies, and even the latest one, which was the grim and gritty one. The way they treat Sue Storm in that is egregious. So I'm just fine with leaving all the. There's probably a way to make a good Fantastic Four movie. No one has figured out how to do that yet. But things did change. And Marvel finally caught a break. And so these two films come out. X-Men 2000, Spider-Man 2002. What changed, you may ask? First of all, you've got two really, really great directors, Bryan Singer of X-Men and Sam Raimi of Spider-Man. I am not going to speak to Bryan Singer's character. He has been vilified lately, and full disclosure, he is someone who was not a friend of mine, but an acquaintance of mine. And frankly, I believe every story about him. He was not the nicest person. However, the screenwriter of X-Men, David Hayter, is a good friend of mine, and he is a wonderful person. And so I got a little bit of insight I got to know them while they were making this film. So I got a little bit of insight into why X-Men is a good film, because they all thought, while they were making it, they all thought that they were blowing it. They really thought that this was going to be a disaster. They said, I don't know who this guy we cast as Wolverine is, but he's so nice. He's too nice to be Wolverine. Of course, Hugh Jackman becomes iconic in the role. There was some costuming problems that they didn't like. Why does this movie work? And I'll tell you very simply why this movie works. It's 92 minutes long. They shot it. The original rough cut was about 129 minutes. And Bryan Singer went into the editing room where he excels, and he trimmed that sucker back. And so it is a lean movie. It hits all of its emotional points without wasting any time. Oh, another thing they didn't like, that Famke Janssen was way taller than the guy who played Cyclops. There's all sorts there. There was a lot of problems with it, but at the end of the day, X-Men is a really strong movie, and of course, it's got themes that resonate. The outsider and all that sort of stuff. Especially because it's not a secret that Bryan Singer is a gay director, and he brought in a lot of themes of trying to like being hidden in the world, and it's just a really strong film. Now, why does Sam Raimi's Spider-Man work? Well, I'm a Sam Raimi fanboy. I go all the way back to why I remember watching Evil Dead 2 over and over and over on VHS, and just loving it. So he obviously left the gore behind, but you can tell that it's been widely reported that Sam Raimi had a Spider-Man poster in his childhood bedroom on the ceiling, so that when he went to sleep, it was the first thing he saw in the morning, last thing he saw at night. So Spider-Man was really, really important to him. And so that's, I think, why you see the love that went into that, and you see the way that it was crafted. And they got a little out of control in 2 and 3, but the first one is just so resonant. Another full disclosure on this: I've never seen the Andrew Garfield ones. I will eventually, and I'll tell you why I didn't watch the Andrew Garfield ones, because there was about 3 or 4 cartoons that came out. The Spider-Man, and then there was the Tobey Maguire, and it's just, frankly, I don't want to watch Uncle Ben die again. It's one of the reasons why I went to go see the Tom Holland films. Like, Uncle Ben you don't have to see Uncle Ben die. It's just been so many times over and over again, we're going to kill Uncle Ben. So what this did was this set up the Marvel universe. Now, these films are not made by Marvel. They were made by Sony and Paramount. They were made by big studios. Later, Marvel would see what they did. You take great directors and you give them the comic book material, they're going to make great films. So we see the beginning of the MCU, and you've got these great directors. You've got the Russo brothers. You've got you've got Favreau. You've got Kenneth Branagh. If you get good directors and you just let the stories tell themselves, then you're going to get better films. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been successful. We will talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So let's move on real quick and look at some side issues, some of the more underground stuff in comic book movies. So Scarlett Johansson's first comic book movie, Ghost World. This is a great little film. This is a great film from the Terry Zwigoff, who made the Crumb, the movie about R. Crumb, and Daniel Klaus, who wrote the book. Just a great study of what it's like to be a weird little girl. And there were Scarlett Johansson was 15 at the time. The other one was about 17, and they just both put on such a great performance. Steve Buscemi's in this, and it came out in that kind of indie era of the post grunge era where American independents were still working, but they said we can take these comic book themes and make them into movies. And of course, on the right, from 2003, is the movie about Harvey Pekar, American Splendor, starring Paul Giamatti. I was at the Sundance of 2003, where this won the Best Picture of Sundance, and it's just such a beautiful film, and it really captures Pekar. And it's like, the thing about Harvey Pekar himself was that he was a very meta creator. He was a comic book writer, writing about the life of a comic book writer, and who had a day job, and that kind of circular storytelling really found its way into this film. It's a nonlinear film, but it also deals with his wife's cancer and just what it's like to be an oddball in society and just not fit in. And you'll see that a lot in superhero films. Superheroes are not the big jocks. You go all the way back to Superman. Clark Kent was the ball boy. That these people just don't fit in, and that's the idea of their storytelling. And then there's the Hollywood horse shit. Pardon me. I was told to keep it PG-13, so I get one. Let me explain what Hollywood horse shit is. William Goldman, the great screenwriter, broke down the idea of movies into two categories: independent thought and Hollywood horseshit. And Hollywood horseshit meant that whoever was won the biggest. So the independent thought, you can break it down to The Natural. The Natural, the book, Roy Hobbs strikes out. That's an independent movie. Natural, the movie, Roy Hobbs hits a home run, blows up the stadium, and everybody goes, yes, we win. That is exactly what he called Hollywood horseshit, that you are playing to the mainstream and confirming mainstream values. Now, what do I mean when I call these two films in particular Hollywood horseshit? What I mean is that this is the classic comic book tale. What do we all want to see? When I think the words John Constantine, as a DC fan who read Hellblazer in the 80s, what do I want? I want the orange trench coat, I want the red tie, and frankly, I want a British accent. Matt Ryan did a fantastic job on the recent television series. I wish that had continued, but Hollywood gave us Keanu Reeves. And so I went back and watched this. I was so appalled by it at first blanch that I couldn't really watch it when I watched it the first time, I just couldn't give it a chance at all. I was so mad at the casting. Yes, I know it doesn't get made if Keanu Reeves is in it. It's still makes me mad. And then I watched the film again. And if you just don't call it Constantine, if you just call him Fred Alexandria, I don't know, something else, it's a great supernatural thriller in the Rosemary's Baby, the kind of way, Exorcist kind of way. But because it's Constantine and because I come with it with so much baggage, I was just incapable of liking this film at the time. Like I said, now I feel like it's a good film that I really wish, like Alan Moore had stripped his name from so many films. I feel like they should have just stripped the DC out of it and just made the film they wanted to make. Now, From Hell, which is also an Alan Moore film, adapted from an Alan Moore piece, this is exactly the same problem. From Hell, the book, is a very clinical and supposedly historic breakdown of who really was Jack the Ripper. And what Hollywood did with it, and again, this is the Hughes brothers. They're great. They've made some really great films. They just wanted to pump up the action. So there's the detective is psychic, and they had to add the mystery, and then they had to give you Heather Graham as one of, make sure that they save one of the prostitutes so that she doesn't get killed. And it's just a very conventional film, whereas the source material was so much more interesting. I think From Hell was a fine film. It's just not the book. It's not even close. And so, again, this is what I talk about. And a lot of comic book films are like this. We complain about this a lot. Why don't you just make the book? I don't know why. Hollywood is weird. They don't understand anything that's not 5 feet in front of their faces. I've lived there. I lived there for many years. It's just the problem with the industry. Okay. So we call this building a universe. We've got DC and we've got Marvel. Now, as a comic book reader, I go DC. I like those characters better. But as a movie fan, you got to go Marvel. They just did a better job. Now, why did they do a better job? I think it's because they had guys like Stan Lee and Kevin Feige in particular who controlled the content. They were not going to let them make a Constantine wasn't going to come out of the Marvel. You were going to see everybody. That Captain America, he's from the book. He's right out of the books. Iron Man, maybe he's a little pushed. Maybe he's a little more manic, but it's really pretty close to the Tony Stark that you see in the books. Thor, all of them. They kept the idea and the characters from the books, and they pushed them forward, and they made all those films. Are all of these films great? No. They're almost all enjoyable, though. They're almost all enjoyable. They have, and then the Avengers films did a pretty great job of taking, 7,000 characters and giving them all enough screen time so that they can achieve their goals. Now, why does DC fail? I think DC fails because instead of having someone from outside of the cinematic world being in charge, they put a writer-director in charge. They put Zack Snyder in charge. And if you don't like his vision, you're not going to like these films. I like The Watchmen. I think it's pretty close to the comic book. It's not perfect. Pretty close to the comic book. Enjoyable. The Superman becomes problematic. And because of this dark vision, I like the Wonder Woman film, Aquaman film. I doubt we're ever going to see the Flash film. I think when you're talking about building a universe, that the CW did a better job than Warner Brothers did. I think the Arrowverse is way more enjoyable than the Justice League verse. Why? I think DC wants to say that it lives in darkness, but Zack Snyder it's actually too dark. Really, the only dark hero in the DC universe is Batman. So we get a Superman that's more like Batman. We get a Wonder Woman that's more like Batman. Everybody's like Batman. There's only one Batman, and that's the problem. Marvel does a different thing. Marvel takes a different tack. They take all these superheroes. They give them their own. They get their own little things, but they're constantly looking. How is this going to be the Avengers? How is this going to be the Avengers? What are we building toward? And you got somebody who's outside the Hollywood system at the reins to make sure that at least we're going to take our properties and get them onto the screen. But the Marvel Cinematic Universe failed on one main character, the Hulk. Now, there are two Hulk films. Both of them are severely flawed. The first one, the Ang Lee film, is made in split screens and is trying to mirror what a comic book looks like. And the problem with that is Eric Bana. Eric Bana just has no. He's got no charisma. He was fine in Troy. He's been good in other things. He just doesn't have any charisma, and it just becomes the Hulk just kind of gets out of control. It never quite knows what movie it's supposed to be. And as the Hulk keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the problems with the movie become bigger and bigger and bigger. They never quite nail down what it's supposed to be. The Edward Norton one is just boring. He's fine as Bruce Banner, but it just doesn't have any flavor. And I think at the end of the day, what happened was they finally found their Bruce. When they found their Bruce Banner, Mark Ruffalo, they finally figured out how to deal with the Hulk. And let's face it, the best Hulk movie is Thor Ragnarok. And finally, I'm going to share with you what I think is one of the more interesting films to come out last year. Fast Color is an African-American based superhero film, independent film made very cheaply. And I think we're going to see a lot more films like this because people do love the tales of superhero. In fact, a new one is about to come out now with Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. But Fast Color is a straight-up independent film. You don't know who these stars are, but it's about a little girl who has inherited her mother's superpowers. Her mother is always on the run, and it's a family drama centered around superpowers. And I think we're going to see a lot of stuff like this before because 4K cinema can be in the hands of independent creators that you don't need huge budgets with things like Adobe After Effects and other special effects that you can make these kind of superhero films without having to make back hundreds of millions of dollars. And I just have a feeling we're going to see a lot more of these kinds of films. And there are others, but this is just the one that I liked the most. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing the screen and I'm going to look at your comments. I noticed that we've had a bunch of questions. So let's see. Can we have? Let's go ahead. I'm going to open it up for questions. I don't really see. Kirsten, I do believe it is on DVD. So yeah, you should try and find Fast Color. What's my favorite worst movie? That is Justin. You want a superhero or just worst movie in general? Because superhero. What's a bad one that I really like? You know what? Like I said, the first Fantastic Four movie actually it's charming. Like the big budget ones don't have any charm. It's terrible. It's terrible. I wanted to like Captain Invincible. It just wasn't very good. I think the Fantastic Four one is the bad movie that I could watch again and get some ideas from it. All right, we have any other questions? Edward Norton. Edward Norton wasn't a bad Bruce Banner. Yeah, I do think Chris is saying that she has enjoyed them, but she's gotten bored, and we've had the steady diet. I do think that we have a little bit of overload going on. I think that I think they should again look to the comics. Now, if you're not reading comics right now, it's wide open. It's amazing what's happening in the books right now. You've got crime, you've got romance, you've got indie, you've got all sorts of stuff like that. Different genres of superhero films. Yes, I think we are going to start seeing those because X-Force is going to be a horror film. I'm actually really looking forward to that. If you haven't watched it, damn it, what's the Legion on FX? Pure psychedelic. I mean, that movie is that TV show is a freak out. One of my favorites. I think we're going to see more horror films with the superhero bent. I think what I would really like. Right now, I'm rereading Batman. I got the DC Universe, and I'm rereading Batman from the 70s, and there's no supervillains. He's really the world's greatest detective, and it's so refreshing. And they're almost like EC comics. They're almost like Tales from the Crypt. What did I think of Logan, revisionist superhero? I liked Logan. I like that kind of hard-boiled nature. I just think Hugh Jackman became Wolverine, and there's a reason why even in the new movies they couldn't get rid of Hugh Jackman. And of course, it's when you get two actors like that, like Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman together, and they're both good, and they're both completely in character, and they've played those characters for so long that you're going to get something good. Was it revisionist? It was projectionist. I mean, it was supposed to be in the far future. So, I mean, I can make a case for Logan. It's also really well shot, and the little girl was, oh man, she was scary. Let's see, any other questions? Any other questions? Why don't we type in what are our favorite, your favorite superhero films, and I'll comment whether I like the. Oh, thank you, Ed. I did. Okay, so Justin writes, do you think that the Star Wars movies are trying to catch the superhero buzz? Definitely. They're definitely now being marketed as if they were superhero films. I haven't seen The Mandalorian yet. I'm dying to, but I have a feeling that that's much more of a comic book. And if you haven't seen. Oh, sorry, I lost it. If you haven't seen the Darth Vader comic books that Marvel put out, they're tremendous. They're so good. There's a character in there that is so good. Let's see. What do I think of the Avengers? I think it's I'm not the second one with James Spader with the computer. Sorry, it's getting late here. That one didn't do it for me, but and from day one, Dr. Aphra, yeah, she's so great. The Thanos cycle was one of my favorite things when I was reading comics in the 80s and 90s, and to see that fully realized and well realized on the screen, that was great. Let's see, are there any westerns? Oh boy. Yeah, the first event. I'll tell you about the first Avengers movie. Everybody, you probably all agree with me, but that the moment where you realize that they really know what they're doing, where they realize they know what they're doing is when Captain America steps up and he starts to lead the Avengers. I'm getting choked up right now like a big girl's blouse. But he steps up and goes, all right, you do this, you do that, and Hulk smash. That's when I knew they know exactly what they're doing. They knew exactly what they were doing, and that was it. The Mandalorian is like a Western. I hope to watch it. The only comic book Western we have right now is Jonah Hex. And the less said about Jonah Hex, the better. Yeah, they really nailed the characters in the Avengers for certain. So Eduardo is asking about Aquaman, favorite superhero as a kid, and you felt you were disappointed. I liked it, but yeah, it was Momoa was interesting. I mean, he's obviously not the blonde Aquaman that we grew up with. And I actually had a fondness for Aquaman too when I was a kid. And it's funny that he's been he's been so disparaged through the years. But yeah, it was fun. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. Wonder Woman, you don't know what that movie meant to women. I can understand it because the first time, because you have a woman director, you have a movie full of women in skimpy clothing without the male gaze. It's pretty amazing. And it's really well. And I thought Gal Gadot handles the part very well. Yeah, she has agency. Aquaman, that one can be debated. All right, it's 10:30 right now. I'm gonna take a couple more questions, but we're gonna have to wrap it up. Or it's 9:30 here in Central Standard Time. I'll take a couple more questions and then we'll have to wrap it up. Anything else? Anything else? I found some Tron footage. Comics TV. Like I said, I think the CW has done a good job. Marvel's Runaways on Hulu. I watched all that. Netflix Marvel. I really enjoyed those, but they got at the end. They needed a laugh track. They needed someone to come in and say, "Can we have a couple of laughs?" They got so grim. And I still haven't watched. I don't think I've watched the third season of Jessica Jones, but I do like what they have. I do like what they do. I really loved the Daredevil, but it got, again, can I have a laugh? Can I just have a moment? The guy who played Kingpin, Vincent, he's such a great actor. Perfect casting for Kingpin. X-Force should be coming out. What am I most looking forward to or hoping gets made? That is a really good question. Except for Iron Fist. I love Iron Fist, the comic book, but problematic. What am I hoping gets made? I would love to one day finally get a Question movie. If you don't know the Question, it's DC's. It was the inspiration for Rorschach. Just a guy who wears a mask, a blank mask, and is a detective. And he has the way they handle him in the Justice League Unlimited is very, very funny. And the comic books from the 80s and 90s are really great. I would love to see a Question movie. Always looking forward to the next Doctor Strange, because Benedict Cumberbatch is and Doctor Strange is such a good one. What's one they'll never make, but that probably. I'm really Bloodshot kind of failed. I'm really interested. The Valiant universe is a new series, but we're gonna see it. Yeah. Valiant is a comic book publisher. They have a series of Bloodshot, the new Vin Diesel film, which unfortunately did not get a release because of COVID. Is the first one, and they have some very interesting characters in there. One of the Valiants is I can't remember, Archer and Armstrong, about a 1,000-year-old or like an infinitely old Babylonian god and a Mormon-esque kid who's taught to be an assassin, and it's a comic series and it's hilarious. That's the movie that needs to be made. Archer and Armstrong. Go look it up. It's so good. It's so good. All right, I'm going to call it here, folks. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. And share the recording of this. It's going to be recorded and up on YouTube. If you're looking for my work, my film Angels Die Slowly, a neo-noir, is available on Tubi TV, Tubi. You can find that on Roku and online. Just search for Angels Die Slowly. You can read my literary fiction under the name Charles D. Brown. I have 2 books looking back on Sodom and a short story collection called The Weird Ones. And if you're interested in my urban fantasy and fantasy, you can find from Griffinwood Press, Vamp City, and Fate Stiletto, both under the name C.D. Brown. So thank you very much. Thank you, Hoover Sci-Fi Fantasy Fest. I've had a ball. I really hope that even though there was only a few of you in here, I really hope you got some good information and you got a laugh and you don't hate me too much over Superman 2. So thank you very much.